What's the biggest problem I see in the upcoming Modern Warfare 3? Well, let's not beat around the bush. I know I spent my last video trying to be positive about the game and trying to more or less spread some gratitude that they're finally listening to us. However, now I gotta roast them a little bit. Let's face the facts here. With all the recycled maps, the carry forward mechanic with the guns, and the return of better movement, we're led to believe that maybe MW3 is more of a glorified expansion than an actual new premium title. And this is something that I am skeptical about with the new release. Although what Modern Warfare 3 is adding to the game is almost all positive, like the quality maps and a good quantity, better movement options, and reverting the change back from the Modern Warfare 2 perk system, the fact that they're charging $70 for this is still a bit questionable. Before I delve into both sides of the argument here, I want to say that I like keeping my videos objective and unbiased. Although my opinion tends to slip in here and there, for the most part, I analyze everything and lay out everything on the table and take into account both sides of the argument. That being said, here we go. The main reason players call this next game just an expansion is the fact that the weapons and attachments that you unlock in Modern Warfare 2 will carry over to Modern Warfare 3. Now, when I first heard this, I was actually pretty happy because I have almost every weapon maxed out and I'm more than halfway to the Orion camo. Now, this isn't because I enjoy the game, but in the first couple weeks of the game, I grinded it heavily before realizing all the super suspicious patents and how boring and slow the gameplay was behind all the hype. However, after hearing that my weapons and attachments will carry over and you can add MW2 attachments to MW3 guns, which is even crazier, I re-downloaded the game to max out every gun and get the mastery camo. Currently, I'm camping like a madman and getting launch ox for platinum, which is absolutely painful. But that got me thinking. This is quite obviously what they want me to be doing. By more or less linking the two games together through means of progression, it heavily incentivizes the purchase of Modern Warfare 2 to get a head start on weapon progress. However, this also brings me to my main point. The fact that once MW3 comes out, MW2 will literally be an obsolete title. Like, completely obsolete. We have a new game that shares the progression and weapons of its predecessor with better maps and better game mechanics. Why would anyone ever in their right mind want to go back to Modern Warfare 2? Unless you want to go back to play the old maps, which I'm sure everyone would love to do, you know, returning to old fan favorites like Santa Sena Border Crossing, or my personal favorite, the highly fast-paced and entertaining Paleo's Lighthouse. In case that went over your head, that was a joke. And most of the maps in MW2 are absolute garbage. See, I told you my opinion would slip in a little bit. This all being said, MW2's significance and importance will more or less just fizzle out when compared to its sequel that promises to right all of its wrongs. The fact that 3,000 devs and 3 years of time were spent to make a title that was unanimously hated by basically the entire community, as well as collectively hated by all of the endorsed streamers that support the game's publicity and revenue, and better yet, a game that was just going to not matter a year after its release? Absolute insanity. I can't even imagine the budget for a game of this size and graphical quality just for it to be rendered completely useless a year later. This allows me to make my next argument though. I've been getting comments suggesting that perhaps the quality of MW2 was purposely bad so they could quote-unquote redeem themselves with the next title, and perhaps get even super unbiased content creators like myself to partially hype up the game because it was righting so many wrongs. And this is more of a conspiracy theory in my opinion, but since the patents seem to be still a conspiracy theory despite them having obvious and extensive proof for existing, like thousands of game clips and the patent literally in writing, I digress. This theory has a couple holes though. For one, I don't think any company would develop a title with this many devs and this much time and intend for it to be terrible, just to rake in more money in the subsequent release. This seems extremely far-fetched to me and I just don't buy it. And actually, I wish I hadn't bought it, but you know. Furthermore, and as I discussed in a previous video about why Modern Warfare 2 couldn't retain players and why it ultimately failed as a game, MW2 was an attempt to cater to casual players by closing the skill gap that ultimately backfired. These 3 years were most likely spent formulating the plan to create the most vicious and state-of-the-art EOMM system gaming has ever seen, and fine-tuning the title to be as appealing to the average player as possible, and maybe even get their skill-based damage and audio fine-tuned as well. But that's still just a theory. A game theory. But once people took to the internet and complained about the SBMM and EOMM being too harsh, the weird damage in audio they had, and the slow and boring gameplay and map design, people started to wake up from the hype and realize how poorly designed of a game MW2 actually is. And that's coming from a guy who bought the $100 version of the game just because I idiotically bought into the hype. Never again. And to be clear, I won't ever try to justify my spending. Just know that I sincerely regret sinking that much money into a game. And to make matters worse, it's the most money I've ever spent on any game ever. And it's the worst game I've ever played. Oh, the irony. I also don't think MW2 was intentionally bad because it was intended to be carried into a second year with an expansion, but was later changed into MW3 with how badly the game was received. This begs the question though, was MW3 always going to happen, or did they turn it into a premium title because its prequel performed so poorly? Since they pushed back Treyarch's title to 2024, creating a gap year for MW2 to breathe, I definitely think more of an update or expansion for MW2 was intended rather than a new game because of how much work pushing out a direct sequel would be. But because desperate times call for desperate measures, the community complained, and XDefiant threatens COD survivability, they needed change, and they needed it darn quick. Enter MW3, which miraculously answered all of our prayers. Wonder why. But now, we're back to square one that I presented first in this video. The fact that MW3 renders MW2 obsolete, and that despite being called a premium title, and with the carry forward happening with the guns and attachments, it's being said that it's more of a huge glorified expansion to MW2 than a new title. And I want to quickly observe the arguments for and against this point. I'm ignoring the fact that Activision said that it wasn't an expansion, because let's be real here, they like to bend the truth a little. Let's assess some arguments against the fact that it's a glorified expansion. First off is the most obvious one, and this is the fact that you won't be able to play MW2 while playing MW3. In other words, the playlists, maps, and other content from MW2 will not be able to be played in MW3 despite the games running on the same engine. Consider MW3 kind of like Warzone. It's a hub for all the progression to culminate together, but the separate titles cannot be played from the same place. Another argument against it being a glorified expansion is the fact that all of the game's mechanics will likely be and feel very different, and thank goodness, a lot faster from MW2's mechanics regarding things like movement, aim down sight speed, the perk system, and so forth. How can an expansion affect all of the core mechanics that made MW2 MW2? Surely only another premium title could do this. Now, although these arguments in my opinion are actually pretty stable, allow me to present the other side to you. First is that the guns and progression carries through. This is a double-edged sword, because all of your progress you made with weapons in MW2 will carry over and are accessible to use in MW3, which is an unprecedented mechanic in COD. The game becomes more of an expansion than a new title, because it still includes all of your hard work from the last title, which just means that you realistically won't have to start from square one again, like someone who didn't buy MW2 but will buy MW3. Consider this like an expansion from a game like Destiny 2. One expansion has a campaign storyline, a ton of new weapons and armor, raises the level cap and whatever else, and the new expansions simply add to what their predecessor did. Further, provided that you own both titles, you can unlock MW2 guns in Modern Warfare 3, but if you don't own MW2, you may have to jump to Warzone to unlock the weapon through the unlock challenges, whether it be a DLC weapon or a base weapon that you have to unlock through climbing the weapon family. That being said, not owning MW2 will make unlocking last year's MW2 weapons significantly more difficult than if you own the game and were able to level them up organically in multiplayer and not have to grind for them in Warzone, which I foresee as being a huge pain. In addition to this point, I'm just going to make a prediction. At least one weapon from MW2 that has a more tedious, long, or difficult challenge is going to be the meta in MW3 to incentivize players to either purchase MW2 or to go play Warzone. But to get myself back on track here, the argument for MW3 being an expansion to the game is also very solid. However, there's one key difference between these two games and two legitimate expansions as seen in games like Destiny 2, and this problem is rather unique in multiplayer gaming, meaning we've never really seen this kind of issue before. Only some of the content from MW2 will be available in MW3, meaning the maps, perks, equipment, field upgrades, and basically everything besides weapons and operators from MW2 will not be available in MW3. So does that make MW3 an expansion or a new title altogether? In a game like Destiny 2, to bring it back up one more time, expansions just expanded the current game, like the name implies. It didn't restrict you from going back to any content from the past expansion. The only Destiny update that did that was when Destiny 2 released and Destiny 1 became a legacy title. The only thing that carried over was your character, and none of the weapons or cosmetics were accessible when jumping to the next premium title. This places MW2 and MW3 in an extremely unique situation that we haven't really seen in gaming ever before. It's a weird hybrid between a premium title and an expansion, where only some content from the past iteration is available, but the new game it's present in has completely updated mechanics, features, and maps. But truth be told, if I wanted to carry some content over from a past game, I'd definitely want it to be the weapons and cosmetics, especially because there's going to be an absolute insane amount of diversity in the metagame now, and it also rewards us for the grind we put into MW2 if you even played the game. Although, I'll be honest, I'm only getting the Orion camo because my stuff is going to carry over. Is it a little outrageous to charge $70? Maybe, and maybe not. Call it an expansion all you want, but if that's truly the case, you'd have to apply that logic to all the other COD games. I mean, every new game is just the same formula with new guns, maps, and mechanics, and that's exactly what MW3 is, with the exception of cosmetics and weapons carrying over from the past title, and of course, the 16 remastered maps and 0 new original maps on launch. I'll cover this in a future video, but reusing a lot of mechanics and maps and calling the game quote-unquote brand new is definitely questionable behavior. But again, that's Activision, and right now I'm just addressing whether or not it's truly an expansion. Now, where this argument makes a little sense is the fact that players that grinded MW2 will have a little bit of a competitive advantage when it comes to guns and attachments, seeing as all these will be usable in MW3. So in that regard, playing the previous game will give you a leg up when starting the newest installment, which is actually a genius and blatantly obvious marketing strategy that will keep player retention high until the new release, especially with the already low numbers and the regular drop in numbers when the new game is announced near the end of the yearly COD cycle. However, this is the biggest criticism that the game has been receiving. It's being knocked for recycling past content. While it's a gripe that I can definitely understand to a reasonable extent, is it really going to be that bad of a thing? Now hear me out. Branding old maps as innovative new content is a very cheap move that I'm going to cover in the future, but is the carry forward thing really that bad? Especially when one, we're just getting rewarded for playing the previous title more, despite it being awful. I appreciate that they're making it benefit us in the near future, and two, most all the maps are going to be super good. I mean, it's looking pretty decent, and if you're looking for a reason why Activision is doing all this stuff to fix the game, let me quickly explain something. XDefiant is threatening Call of Duty big time. XDefiant promises the fast-paced classic COD gameplay that everyone loved in the golden age of COD. The only way to outshine a title that does everything better than your latest title is to make a new title that does classic COD better than XDefiant promises to do classic COD, which means they have to give their game the same fast-paced mechanics that XDefiant has, they have to give us better maps than XDefiant has, enter the 16 OG COD maps that do OG COD the best, and last but not least, make sure your previous title stays alive, which then translates easily into cross-progression and rewarding the player base for still playing your current title until the new run releases. So really, I'm treating MW3 as a response to XDefiant more than anything else. We as a community definitely backed them into a corner, but for the most part, so did XDefiant. All I'm saying is that I hope they come through, and if they don't, I will be playing XDefiant. That's all I got. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Take it easy.